All right, welcome back to Two Glasses and a Movie. This is Connor,
And this is Tanner.
and we're back talking about another movie again and switching it up a little bit to now talk about a movie that was critically acclaimed and looked at as a really good movie, which was Gaslight. So, this movie is from 1944. It got a 7.8 on IMDb, so a really, really good score. It's directed by George Cukor, if I don't know if that's how you say his name, but I think that's how you say his name. And the main two characters, that main actors in this movie, are Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman, who was in Casablanca like a year or two before this movie. So I think it was like right after she had done Casablanca. So Tanner, what made you want to choose this movie?
About that because I knew we were going to talk about that. That's usually how we set it up. And I was like, I'm not sure I know why I chose this. I think, in maybe 6 to 8 years ago, we started hearing this phrase like gaslighting in terms of relationships or something. And, at some point then, I knew that it was vaguely in reference to this movie. And then I think, honestly, the reason I suggested this was sometime in the past couple months, I was scrolling through all the movies on HBO Max, and I just saw that it was on there. And I was like, it's on there, but then we should watch it. That seems like a good idea. And so we had also, we had done a couple bad movies, and we were saying, we want to watch good kind of classic movies sometimes too. So I figured now's a good time. Do a couple bad ones, do kind of an older, good one. And this is our definitely oldest by, 50 years. So it'll, kind of the first time we're doing a significantly old movie.
Yeah, it is. It's extremely old for sure. I saw 1944, and I was like, "Whoa, that's." Not that I think I've seen some movies in the 40s, but I was like, "Yeah, no, normally I don't just watch like one of those for fun, normally."
Not a
Um,
lot, yeah.
so yeah, not a lot at all. So this movie is said I got a couple different years for this, but I got 1874 and 1880s, so late 1800s, whichever one you want to land on. But just a quick synopsis for this movie. After the death of her famous opera singing aunt, Paula is sent to study in Italy to become a great opera singer as well. While there, she falls in love with the charming Gregory Anton. The two return to London, and Paula begins to notice strange going ons, missing pictures, strange footsteps in the night, and gaslights that dim without being touched. As she fights to retain her sanity, her new husband's intentions come into question. So pretty good like overarching of kind of the movie and what we see here. So Tanner, do you want to just like walk through some stuff you saw, you noticed, just kind of walking through the movie, your thoughts on it?
A brief interjection. I'm getting some kind of pauses and lags from you, just so you know. And I wrote down a couple times that we can check in case. So yeah, that's kind of the basic plot line. I gotta just start off by saying the first shot of the movie is a guy out on the street lighting a gaslight, and I was like, there you go, that's nice. You don't get to see a official like this is the title that often, so I thought that was fun. Yeah, there's a handful of little odd things kind of right off the bat where I was like, it does the thing where an amount of time passes quickly without you knowing. So I guess her aunt had been murdered and she was away for a while, but we don't know how long. And then she goes outside and meets this guy, and she mentions they've been together a couple weeks, and they're already talking about, getting married and stuff. Different time. I guess people did that sometimes. But, so they basically decide that they're gonna end up, moving back to this house that she owns. And one of the questions I have, which I'll just kind of say here at the beginning, is so we kind of know that he is misleading her. He's sort of manipulating her in these different types of ways throughout the movie. And so I was really curious if that literally did start like from the very beginning, and if she was noticing those little types of things from the beginning or not. Because really quickly on when we're watching, I already, I wrote down this quote. They had walked outside, and he goes, "Aren't you cold like this?" And for me, it was kind of just the first time where he is, putting an idea in her head about, like, don't you feel this certain type of way? And then obviously he is going to continue doing that a lot of different times. And so they get in the house, and one of the first things, she sees her aunt's stuff, and she's like, "Oh, it's kind of making me sad, but like I like my aunt's stuff." And he's like, "Well, we should just get rid of all of it. Like we should just put it away somewhere, and you'll never have to look at it." And I thought that was odd from the very start. I was like, what a weird thing. But I think it is. There's some good. I did think this movie did a great job of sort of sprinkling a little thing in that like really will come back in kind of an important way later on. Um, yeah, I'm gonna pause for a minute. What you got?
Yeah. I think I didn't notice the part you said about him telling her how to feel like a certain way with being cold. I really like that. I didn't notice that. I
Yeah,
think that's really good. I didn't like, which they do a lot in the movie, like from the get go, they're playing sinister music and zooming in on him, and you know as the
right.
audience like right away, well this guy's the bad guy for sure, even before they even like really say that, and that happens. So I'll talk more about that later, but I like that's a really good subtle way that they say that. Not that I didn't like the music itself. I did like the music. I thought they did a good job with that. I think that was one thing that they got props for in the movie was the music, that they had done a really good job with that, and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the first times where we have like a good reason to be a little bit suspicious or to think something is a little off with this guy. They're looking through things, and she finds this old letter that was sent to her aunt, and it basically says like, we don't know who the letter is from, but it was to her aunt, and the guy writes, I saw you in this place, and I really wanted to be able to like talk to you again, and I followed you here to London. I hope I can catch up with you. And she reads the name on it, and he just flips out and, kind of snatches it away from her. And for us, we're like, that was weird. Because in the moment, we don't know anything else that's going to happen. We're just like, dang, dude, you really overreacted to hearing that name. But it's one of those, like, not really that subtle if you know the whole storyline, but it's a subtle thing. You're like, okay, like that name means something to him, obviously.
And what if off of that, like, what if that was the first thing that he did that was like, oh, that was real, that was kind of crazy what he just did. If they didn't have the scenes earlier of the movie implying that he was a bad guy, it's like imagine how that scene would have been if you could still have the thing where he says, "Aren't you cold like this?" And maybe some other small stuff, but like that was a missed opportunity for that to be the first thing for you as an audience to be like, "Oh, whoa, like what's going on here? Like, what's this movie going to be about then?" Because like you might not know then up to that point. So another just kind of a missed opportunity I feel like with it, but I do like that with the letter and stuff.
I think that one of the things that did make this different from modern movies a lot is that they didn't do much of the like really sweet loving part at the beginning. Pretty much from the beginning we see like, well, something is a little odd about this type of thing. And yeah, I agree. If the first 10-15 minutes had been that he seems better, I think that would have been, they could have maybe waited to reveal a couple of these like things. But I would say mostly from the beginning, most audiences would be like, I don't like this guy really. At the very least, something is odd about him. And at the most, you're like, this guy is bad news already. Like, there's enough things pretty quickly that you could kind of see that. So that letter's first big thing. And you don't have to pop out every time, because I need to hear you laughing sometimes so they know that they're supposed to
Yeah.
laugh too.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I just one question I wanted to ask you: how old do you think that they're supposed to be in the movie? Like, what ages are they now? What were your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I had not really thought that much during when I was watching it until you said something. But I was like, when she's living with her aunt, presumably she's like a younger teenager, maybe like when her aunt is killed, maybe like 13 or 14. She seems like she's gone for maybe 3 to 4 years. So I'm assuming she's like maybe 19 or 20. And then, oh, you don't think so? What do you think?
Well, it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years since her aunt died.
Oh
So
yeah, okay,
add 10 years to whatever age you think she was as a kid.
okay. So
So
maybe she's like
which
30.
they're I mean, I would say like 25 ish, even maybe even younger. I mean, because
Okay,
I think she was maybe middle, teen, early, young. I think you're right, young teenager, mid teenager when she died. She's sent away, and actually, what I kind of feel like is she's prepping for like her first big show potentially. I'm just like assuming for
right.
her first big show. So she's like young mid 20s, and it's not very clear for the other guy other than in the note, or maybe you find out later. I forget when you find out, but when this letter's written 10 years ago, he's like a younger guy who plays the piano, and like that's really all you know of his age. So maybe young 20s. So maybe he's 30, young 32, which is like not that crazy at that time for sure.
Yeah,
Their real ages, like they're like 15 years apart, but I'll ignore that, I guess. But in the movie, yeah, I feel like they're
yeah.
maybe 6 to 8 years apart, and like maybe she was a teenager, add 10 years, but it's not like super clear how old she was or anything.
Yeah. Well, something that is interesting too is like, presumably she doesn't have a job of any type of thing. She's like training to be a singer. But we also know that she inherited this house, and apparently everything that was in it, which was a lot, it looked like
Hmm.
a pretty rich person's house. So
Yep,
then
yep, she seems
also,
famous.
when he's first introduced and later, it's like this dude doesn't seem to have a job. He moved into her house. And I'm like, where is their money coming from? Like, he doesn't work. He doesn't seem like he has money. Who is paying for anything here?
I think that you just have to assume that she has a trust fund, and that's how she's been able to pay for lessons and just live for the past 10 years. And because
Right.
they're throughout the movie, they don't work anywhere. They're Kramer from Seinfeld. They don't have a
Right.
job, and they're just like hanging out, existing. And you're like, wait, but how are you able to do that? And you do get a big hint that her aunt was famous and rich, left the house, to her and everything. So I guess that she's got money. That's all you know for sure, I guess.
And they have two full-time staff.
Well, yeah, because you can, I laughed when he's interviewing Murder She Wrote to be the maid there, or whatever her title was, I kind of forget. But he said it was going to be 16 pounds a year, and I had like looked that up because I was like,
I
man, I
was
know
gonna
this is so
say
long
that.
ago. I know that's so long ago, but that still seems like super low. And I had looked it up, and it would have been about 20. It was twenty four
I just
hundred
did the
U.S. dollars.
calculation too.
It was 2,400 roughly U.S.
Right. So
dollars,
it's
and
like,
even now it'd be like 13 grand now. And I was like, that seems like low. I mean, she
yeah,
gets she gets to
yeah. I
live
mean,
there, I guess, but
when they said that, I was like, dang, dude, I know wages were low, but like in an entire year, I'm like, that's like 12 cents a day or something. Like, it did seem odd. I thought that seemed odd at the very beginning. So let's jump into just moving ahead a little bit. We do see immediately that he is going to be like controlling her and kind of telling her how to think and what to do in a bunch of different types of ways. So we see, there's this old woman that's kind of like the gossip, that it is a little bit of like a old school like play device of, just having this person kind of pop in and comment on a couple things, or kind of tell bits and pieces of gossip. She fills in a part of the story to the detective here and there. But so that woman tells us, they don't really come and go out, and there aren't really other people coming and going. And so we hear the guy say relatively early on that they don't have a lot of visitors because it's not good for her. She's not well. And so it's like, I do understand, but at the same time, I am confused by this. Like, what? I don't understand his kind of goal or reasoning exactly from the very beginning of kind of telling her that she's not well. Or, he really quickly, early on says, you're inclined to lose things. You've been forgetful lately. And I would say, in general, I don't understand why he is, like, manipulating her in these type of ways. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that so as the movie goes, we know that he's like looking for something in her stuff. So I think he comes up with the best plan that seems to work, and it's a movie, so it's going to work because that's the way they wrote it. But the best plan seems like, hey, I don't want people here. I kind of need the house to myself. But they're still going to hire two other people, even though one of them is hard of hearing. So that's kind of a
Right.
specific hire that I feel like he did. So I think the main goal was like, I just don't want her to have people here at all, and like keeping her here will do that because maybe he knows if she does go out, like people are gonna like her. She's gonna be around people. She's gonna have people over. She's gonna be a socialite. He's like just dead set, like he cannot have people in the house, and on top of that, like question some things, like he boards up the third floor, the attic, whatever the top floor is, he boards that up. Well,
Yeah.
that would be an immediate conversation starter for basically everyone coming to the house, going, "Hey, man, what's up with that being boarded up, man? Like, what's going on up there?" So that's what I think. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, even, with this type of guy, he obviously is paranoid. Like, he knows things that he has done in the past, and he knows what his motives are for this. So he is paranoid. So what you said, I think makes complete sense. Because I was kind of like, if he is going to spend a bunch of time searching through the stuff, why would he also want her in the house all the time? But I think what you said really just is the whole thing. He's like, I can't let anyone hear. I can't let her see anyone or talk to anyone. She might mention that I am the way I am. I don't want other people knowing me or interacting with me. Like, he's so paranoid about controlling the situation that he's like, I can't have either of us interacting with anybody. I think that makes sense. That's got to be kind of what was going through his mind.
I think the other two things too were, one, he knew that would keep her like in her room and in bed. So maybe it's, which he didn't, but maybe at some point he could search during the day, but it like definitely let him like search at night with no issues, and everything.
Right.
And then the other part that they like strongly were hinting at was that like he was going to send her away to, a hospital or somewhere, and it was like that was the long term plan. I feel like because really the whole, when they moved to the house to the end of the movie, I mean it's like 3 months, which is like really not that long overall. So he
Yeah.
did have kind of like a short term plan to be like, all right, well, eventually I can get her out of the house so that I can search, search for stuff, which maybe we could talk about later. Maybe about having to search through all this stuff for 3 months and not find anything. Maybe that's something we could tackle later on. But that was kind of annoying.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, until you just said it, it's interesting when we talk about this stuff. There's like little things that we each pick up on that the other one doesn't. I don't think that I picked up on, maybe that his plan all along was to end up getting her put away somewhere so he could just completely live in her house and take all her money. I didn't really like put together that like maybe that was his actual whole plan was I can get back the thing I'm looking for, and it's not my fault. She went crazy. I didn't want to have to send her away, but I had to.
Yeah,
And then he just has his whole, her whole house. Like, I bet that probably is what it is. Kind of just as the time progresses, he it's interesting if you, I don't want to, congratulate this guy or anything, but he, he really, he really is like in her head in like a lot of different types of ways, not just one way. Early on, he gives her this brooch from his mom, and that's a thing where, when you are, he is like probably like a sociopath. Like we would probably define
Yeah.
him by that in different types of ways now. So he gives her this gift, which is a big thing for people that kind of want to control you. Then, as soon as he gives it to her, he's like, "Oh, well, I don't want you to wear it though, because the pin is broken a little bit. I don't want it to slip off. So we'll just put it in your purse, because you lose things sometimes, and I just wouldn't want you to lose it." And then, that comes around later, and she can't find it. And obviously, for us, we're immediately like, that bastard didn't even put it in her purse. Like, he put his hand in the purse and then he just whatever. You're like, come on, man. And so there's that. So then when she can't find it, he could be like, oh, Paula, I told you you were going to lose it. This is just what happens. And then he can use that to be like, when we go out places, something bad happens. That's why I make you stay here. I don't want to, but it's just hard to go out in public. Like, he uses all these different types of things. And then, when she does kind of react and when she does push back a little bit, he uses all these phrases. He's like, calm yourself, control yourself, you're being hysterical. Why are you overreacting? Which is kind of the classic thing of invalidate her feelings and make it seem like, in many cases, she is having like a very valid reaction because he is manipulating her, but he makes her feel like, oh no, this is just you. I didn't even do anything. I just gave you this gift. And so one of the craziest ones, she gets this invite to go to, a show at a friend that she used to know. And he's like, well, I wanted to surprise you by like letting us go to that, basically. And then as soon as he does that, she's like, oh, you're just the nicest man. You're the best. You're so good to me. Because it's like, once he does that nice thing, it like wipes out all of the stuff that he has been doing to kind of trick her and manipulate her lately.
I think part of like why that would work too is because her, which they don't really talk about, but like her parents died. It's I don't know. I can't remember if they said that or not. But her aunt
When
had
she was
raised
really
her.
young, though. Yeah.
Yeah, when she was really young. So just her aunt had raised her, and then she was murdered. So she had her parents pass away, and then an aunt that was murdered, and like she just wants someone to like love her too. So it's also like the perfect person that like that manipulation would work on. I would think anyway. I don't know if they like if the writers like meant that to like work out like that, but that also is like the perfect pass for someone to have for this type of manipulation and psychological warfare to work because she just wants to be loved by someone and be in a healthy relationship and would probably do anything to make that happen because so far the very few people that she has loved and cared about they passed away.
Yeah. And so, obviously, at the beginning, he is kind of doing these little things, he's performing these little tests where she always, like, ends up being wrong because he is manipulating her. He points out, hey, there's this picture missing from the wall. Like, why did you move it? And she's like, I didn't move it. And he's like, oh, well, it must have been our servants. Like, I'll bring them both in here and question them in front of you. And they obviously didn't move it, so Paula, it must have been you. I guess you forgot that you moved this thing. And there's just, as it goes on, it does make you be like, because you're just like, you see what's happening, and you do, I definitely, she was a very, like, empathetic character to me. I was like, you're nice, and this is frustrating that this is happening. But there's, like, a little bit of level of being like, man, like, I wish, it seems like she would be able to be, like, seeing some of these things that are happening to her.
I think too on like just another level of why this worked was like she was training for 10 years and like maybe who someone who was a dancer or in this case a singer, like that was her life, like that's all she did. So she also probably wouldn't have regular relationships, making just a huge assumption because they didn't talk about that, but like she would
Yeah,
have just been training the last 10 years, like that's all she would have been doing. Also got sent, away from where she grew up, um,
yeah,
and everything. So she went to a new place and was immediately training to sing. So it's like she didn't even have, maybe she didn't even know what a healthy relationship would look like or had friends or anything. It's not like she was ever calling. At some point, even in 1800s, you probably would have sent a letter um, in the mail to a friend to be like, oh yeah, crazy stuff's going on, and or I'm happy, so happy to be something, and there's nothing. Like she never reaches out to her, making a huge assumption. But there's just a bunch of little things like that they do that it's like that's why that works so well.
yeah, and also just she probably has never. It's almost like whatever age she is, she hasn't really become an adult because she hasn't probably lived alone. She hasn't probably been making her own decisions. She's under the teaching of this like really well-known music instructor. She probably is when she gets with him, she's just like, I don't make choices on my own. Like I kind of have someone telling me what to do most of the time. And so when you have someone kind of telling you what to do, for her, like her natural inclination is to listen to him, and she also is missing these little things that he's doing to manipulate her. And it's so interesting. There are a few moments, obviously by the very end of it, she is able to kind of break the spell and stand up for herself. But there are like a couple little things here and there where she kind of tries to, where she kind of says like, I want this thing, or maybe she expresses that she is frustrated with him. And every time she does that, he'll like kind of question her one thing after another, and he'll kind of, well, he'll kind of, scoff at her reactions or make it seem like the answers she's giving are dumb. And so eventually she just agrees with him because she's like, I guess you probably are right. Like, I thought, this thing made sense to me that I was thinking, but, I guess you've shown me that I was dumb, and, like, I guess I don't understand. And it's like, you kind of get, it's like it's not her fault, really. She is trying sometimes to kind of stand up for herself, but when you got a dude like this, as smart as she could be, he's just like, he's always a step ahead of kind of what she is starting to figure out about something or other.
Yeah, yeah. Why? Let me throw another question out to you. Why do you think he waited 10 years, like to do this plan? Like, why wait that long to do this?
So I actually, we were talking before, and I was like, when we discuss this movie, it is going to be different than talking about Showgirls or talking about Gigli because those were bad movies, and we were going to run through all these things that didn't make sense and all these criticisms. I felt like for the most part, this movie didn't have a lot of that for me. I think there are, little plot things where we're like, you couldn't really get that by in a modern movie. But I think for the most part, it's a good movie. The story is written well. Most of the things people do make sense. And if there are moments that don't make as much sense, you're like, well, it's older. Like the way people thought was different and stuff like that. But I do have kind of like one major flaw with this that I think we can go ahead and talk about since you ask. So you're basically saying, why did he wait 10 years and he meets her and all this stuff? So I'm going to see that question and re-raise you. Why does he need to be in any type of relationship with her, period? Why doesn't, after he kills the person, why doesn't he wait a year and then just come back and break into the house again? And then, like, the whole plot wouldn't need to happen.
Yeah, I think to that question, he felt like he needed to make sure he had a reason to be there because for some reason it took 3 months to find the jewels he was looking for. So he knew that it
Right.
was going to take a while to find and to search through the whole house. So like that's why he was so giddy about moving everything to one room upstairs because it would
Yeah,
take
yeah.
longer. So even though maybe he had a way in, he knew it was going to take a really long time. So I do feel like he needed to have a reason, and that was the best one. Was like, oh, I could be in a
Okay.
relationship with her, and like if I live there, no one's going to question me being there because I live there. So to your question, that's what I would say. I mean, that's I don't. Do you have a different thought about
Yeah.
that?
No, I mean that makes sense. Like I guess if he, I mean, I guess technically speaking, I don't think he like knew that the jewels he was looking for even were in the house. I don't know if he like knew with certainty that they were in the house. So maybe yeah, breaking in. But there's a lot of logistics for me of like did he like know that this girl that even was in the house and knew it happened? Did he did he follow her for 10 years? Did he just kind of get lucky that he found her at a place? There's a few things like that that I think are not like plot holes, but they are like, I don't know, like I'm not for sure if that makes sense kind of logically how he put all that together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of guessing. I don't think he knew it was her that came downstairs. At the end of the movie, or at some point, they talk about that. He's like, "Well, I was interrupted, and someone came downstairs," but like, I don't. He didn't know who it was. And when I
Right.
kind of thought like the 10 year, like, why wait 10 years? Well, if she was like a young, like a 12 or 13, 14, like he kind of would need to wait that long because you got to wait that long, like to be married. Again, he said he was a young pianist. Maybe he was 20 and she was like 14. I don't know if that was a faux pas or not in the 1880s. I'm gonna assume so.
Right.
So it's like he had to wait a comfortable amount of time before he could like court her basically, and then it took that long to be able to because such a long game plan, but to become the one playing the piano for her for teaching, and as soon as he was able to start that relationship with her, and then his hope was to like move there basically because it only been a few weeks that he had even been there that they say at the beginning of the movie. But at the end of the day, you don't really know. Like you just don't. It doesn't really totally make sense.
Okay, so you just said something, and I need to clarify if you said what I thought you said, and if I completely missed this. Was this guy the one playing the piano with her teacher and her?
At the very beginning, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think I really
he
just
was.
I didn't notice
But
that. I really
he'd only
I just missed that, I guess, like
he'd
cuz he
only
was
been
only
there
in
a
the
few
room for a
weeks.
minute and then he left. And I mean that changes things for me. I guess like the piano player left and I was like, well, that's not an important character, and then I just forgot immediately. I didn't recognize that it was him. So maybe I'm still just a little bit like, had he really been like kind of following her or tracking her for 10 years to like I just don't know. I'm not sure if this guy for me actually seems smart enough to pull off that type of thing that he like follows her and he waits 10 years and all this type of stuff. Cuz yeah, like he is a clever criminal or whatever, but I don't know. I feel like putting all those little pieces together, I just don't know if I want to give him that kind of credit.
Well, let me tell you something about guys, man. So last night I was looking for a little foam piece for my AC unit in my window to block the warm air. I came down to the basement. I almost gave up after about 10 seconds because I couldn't find it for about 10 seconds. But I tell you what, if I'm thinking about a football player's stats from like the 80s or something, or a weird team or something, and I can't find it, I'm going to take some serious time to find it because I want to know the answer to that. So I'm just saying, in this movie, this dude really cared
That's
about these
valid.
these jewels for some reason, And even though he might not
Yeah.
have the knowledge to do that, like he would totally just be like, "All right, I'm going to keep tabs on her for like as long as I need to," and he would because he really cared about it. So I think this dude cared enough about the jewels because he's crazy about it. We saw him. There's a scene, a few scenes where they go out in public. Well, the first one they go to that museum and he's like gushing over these
Yes.
jewels,
He gets so
and that's
intense
like,
about like the
yes, he loves
crown,
them.
the
Yes,
necklace.
yes.
Yeah.
I wish they would have. I wish I would have known a little more why, but he's like foaming at the mouth just looking at these jewels. So he cared enough about it. I think he
Yeah.
would find a way to make it happen.
I think that makes sense. So not necessarily that he, was so smart and he was orchestrating this like really long-term plan, but just that he was, you know, patient and persistent. He was like, I'm pretty sure the jewels are in this house. I have to find a way to get there. I bet if I kind of wait long enough, put myself in the right positions, I can end up in some type of relationship with this girl so I can get in the house. I think that makes sense. So I want to jump back into like kind of plot specifics. I think these have been a couple good tangents to try to figure out some of the motives and stuff like that. So we mentioned this letter. They read it at the beginning. So in the last maybe like 20 minutes, half an hour, like definitely towards, she has started to figure out like something is going on here. There has been kind of this detective that, the kind of B storyline is this detective has kind of been working on this case because he felt like he's kind of put a couple things together. So he ends up getting in contact with Paula and shows up at her house, and he's going to talk to her about some stuff. But a little bit before that, Paula mentions again, like, I found that letter and I saw the name, and we see her like starting to put something together. And so I think, if I'm right about this is the first time that he like outright lies to her about an experience that we know for a fact she had. And he literally says, like, Paula, that day that you mentioned this letter, there was nothing in your hand. You weren't holding anything and you made up this story. And that's the first time we are like, excuse me, like we know for sure that the thing happened. Whereas some of the other ones were like, well, technically speaking, we didn't see Paula move or not move the painting. We didn't see her, forget or not forget. Like, we're a little bit like, well, maybe, she is. We don't know for sure. Like, she could be going crazy. We don't technically know for sure that she's not. And so this is the first moment where we're like, no, not true, dude. Like, we know for a fact that letter was there. And then, but the problem is, like, she's so used to believing him that she's like, dang, like, I guess I am losing my mind. Like, I guess there wasn't a letter. And it was kind of crazy. It was just like, dang, she really, she believes him. She's like bought into this story that he's telling her.
I mean, you had mentioned like beforehand, like we don't know for sure. We definitely saw him like the pocket watch thing. This is after the pocket watch, I think. So he goes up to his room with his
Yeah.
pocket watch and like takes it out. So like we know that he did that for sure.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know another one specifically off the top of my head, but like again, if the people who made the movie didn't make it so obvious, it's like yeah, that would have been like a cool thing to be on the edge of your seat and be like, whoa, is she crazy or is he actually like the bad guy? Like what's going on? But it's like they didn't waste any time to let you know and then repeatedly like let you know that like this guy he is him. He's the bad guy.
Yeah. Well, I do think it is like a, the way that movies are done differently. I do think, I don't know how like quite the right way to say it, but it's like an audience in 1940 was not as smart as we are. They had seen way less movies, etc. So like you're not generally with a movie this old going to have like really really suspenseful like uncertainty kind of. It is, a kind of thriller, it's a little suspenseful, but at the same time for us, it is like pretty obvious because we know more stuff and we've seen a lot more movies where we are like, I literally don't know for sure what's real. because they're shifting things on us. So I think that it, if you want to talk about like does it hold up in the same type of way? Probably not as much. There's a lot less suspense for us because we kind of can see they are being like relatively obvious about these different types of things that are happening. Good time to kind of
I wanted
transition towards
I wanted to jump in on like one thing though when talking about like
yeah.
have seen more and like just like know more. I just feel like there are like movies in the 40s that like did have twists and there were like suspenseful things people did and I should have looked up for some like before the pod but I think there are like I'm sure I could go through Hitchcock's movies in the 40s and he's got to have one that was like oh this is one right here. Like here's a twist, like in this one, and it's like around the same time. So I feel like they could
Yeah,
have.
no, I get what you're saying. I definitely wouldn't say like no movie from this time could possibly be like all the way suspenseful, but I do think that
Yeah, yeah,
overall this was one where they were, I think they knew they were being like somewhat obvious with little bits and pieces. I don't think it was supposed to be like kind of the most secretive whole thing. So kind of we're getting like pretty close to the end of the movie. So there comes a certain time where Gregory is out. The detective is able to kind of like get to the house and he's going to talk to Paula and he he gets into I think how it comes up is he's like, "Hey, like does your husband have a gun?" And she's like, "Yeah, like why are you asking me?" And he's like basically like something is probably about to happen. Maybe we should have a gun. She's like, I think it's in the desk, but you can't go in there. Like, don't. And even at this late time, she is like kind of protecting her husband, and she like trusts her
yeah.
husband a little bit more than this policeman and stuff. So he breaks into the desk, he opens the gun box, and the gun's not there. Obviously, because we're like, I don't know, like it seems like the dude would have this gun on him most of the time, because he's sketchy like that. So this was one of the moments I found kind of the most interesting. The detective has been finding this different stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of like say a big reveal that the audience, that is listening to us doesn't know yet. So what the detective tells her is like, hey, he finds the letter and he's like, hey, this letter, first of all, it does exist, and she's like, I knew it existed, man, and I'm like, well, you kind of believed your
Did
husband
you
that it
though?
didn't exist. So they find the letter together. Yeah. And he's like, "Hey, so here's the thing. One of the suspects in your aunt's murder was this Sergius Bauer, which is the name on the letter." And he's like, "I hate to tell you this, but like this Sergius Bauer is your husband, Gregory. He wrote this letter and he was a suspect all along." So that was crazy. That for me, I was like, "Dang, this is." I mean, I don't think that. Did you like know that already? I don't think I knew like that already specifically.
That he was the Sergius Bauer guy, or that the husband was actually like that the husband actually did it.
Well, how about just both? Like, did you already kind of know both those things?
Yeah, like in the beginning of the movie when they played the music and they zoomed in on him, it's like, okay, he's the bad guy. He killed the aunt. He wants something. We don't even know what. It was like, yeah, duh. Thank you,
Okay,
MGM, whoever made this
but as
movie.
far as
So
I don't think like in the movie, I don't think that like you are supposed to really know that yet.
yeah,
Do you
maybe
think?
if you watched this movie live in the 40s, you would just be like, oh, something sinister is happening at the house. Maybe
Yeah,
there's a ghost. Ooh, a ghost.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
you're like
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not sure. So I know for sure off the bat that this is the bad guy for sure, which is annoying. The second thing
Okay.
is yes, as soon as she read the letter and he snatches the letter from her and is acting
Yeah.
like crazy. It's like okay, this is the Surgis guy, and he was the piano person because I also already know that like he did it. So this is like just me telling this. The movie's telling me who he is now, which I
Yeah.
just hate. I need to not know, and
Okay.
I just know, and you know the whole time you're watching the movie. So it wasn't like a big reveal for me,
Yeah, for
but I
sure.
do definitely like in the 40s, like probably a huge reveal for sure.
I feel like I probably did know like that he had done the stuff. I don't think that I specifically made that connection. Like this letter was one that he wrote, and that's his name. I don't think I like for sure made that connection. So, but here's why this scene is so interesting to me. The detective like lays out this whole theory. He's like, for one, you're not crazy. Here is what I think the guy is doing. I think that he went a couple houses down and he broke into that house. He went across the roof and he came in through the top of your house. I think that he has been up in the top floor. He's looking around for these jewels. I think that he has turned on the gaslight. And when you have seen the gaslight going up and down, because that's a plot point that has been mentioned a couple times, he's like, I think that's what's happening. You're not crazy. You're not imagining noises. You're hearing noises, and you're seeing the gaslight. He lays this theory out to her, okay? And then she's like, no, not my husband. He wouldn't do that. I don't think it's him. And you're like, in that moment, you're like, she's lost. Like, she's not coming back, man. She gone. Like, she is bought in to this dude's whole thing. And that did surprise me
But
a
she
little
comes
bit.
back though.
Yes.
She comes back though later, which is a
Spoiler
really good
alert.
scene later.
So that's the thing. So obviously, they're hearing. Eventually, they kind of see the gaslight go back up, which is, and we have been, as he's been having this conversation with her, we're seeing Gregory Surges, look through, and he like finds the jewels, and he, it's like a big moment for him. He's like, I found him, dude. Like, I've been looking for a long time. And so as these things are playing out, we see him literally doing what the detective had just described. He goes out the window, goes back across. So we know, like, a confrontation is about to happen here in a minute. They seem a little bit surprised by it, but it's like, yeah, obviously this dude is, like, on his way back. And so then there's the big confrontation and, a struggle and this and that. It's just like, I think so in that moment, when she sees him come back, he kind of talks his way through it, and you kind of don't know, like, is she gonna get it? Like, is she gonna see it even when
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
right in front of her? And I mean, it really took until the information was, like, undeniable in front of her, till she was like, oh, like, yeah, this must be the case.
Yeah, I love. I mean, that was the best scene at the end when he has like one more manipulation scene with her where he tries to convince her otherwise, and he's like, "Hey, there's a knife in there. Can you grab it?" And she's like, "What? There's no knife in here. I must have misplaced it again." And then she pulls out a knife, and I forget exactly what she says, but she's like, "Well, I'm going crazy. I just can't remember where things are at." And she like chucks it or something, and it's like, "Oh, that was solid, man. Like there was a little bit more to that
It
interaction,
was a
but that was
really
really cool."
great ending.
You know?
It was a great ending because he's tied up. There's been a little scuffle between him and the detective. The detective takes him to this other room, ties him up, and she's like, I want to go talk to him. And the detective's like, no, like, it's not a good idea. And she's like, I'm gonna go talk to him. And then it was so good because you see all of it is like revealed to her. She's like, yeah, this dude has been manipulating me the whole time. I know for sure I'm not crazy. I thought I was crazy for a little bit. So then, one of the last ploys that he does, he had told her earlier on in the movie, your mom, like, died shortly after you were born. She had, like, ended up in an asylum, and, like, it's probably genetic. Like, you're probably going crazy too. And so it was interesting, when he is tied up, he has already been caught, everything is there. This man does not give up. He's like, I think that I have enough control, I can still, like, maybe get her to let me out of this. And he basically says, like, yeah, like that stuff I told you about your mom, like that wasn't true. But like this other thing that I'm telling you, like this can still be true. And I'm just like, that is a bold move, my friend, to be like, well, I definitely did lie to you about this one part, but like, not this other part, and you should still trust me now. It's a bold move to make that play at the end, and it doesn't work. And it was a great turnaround. She's like, well, I'm crazy. I don't even know what knife. I didn't even see it. It was good. It was like that. It is like it's the way you want it to end. You're just like, she gets it and she like got her power back, and you're like, yeah, screw this dude. Like, make him feel stupid. I enjoyed it. It felt good to watch.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much
Well,
the end. I think it was a good kind of climactic build up in that last maybe like 15 minutes or so, and I was really satisfied with kind of the way that everything wrapped up at the end.
yeah, I thought. I mean, the ending was solid for sure. I'm still like annoyed that it like this guy took 3 months to look through like all the stuff up there and like never found it till the end. Like, you also get to see him like he's maybe only gone for like 20 or 30 minutes. You don't know for sure, but I'm just thinking about that now. It is a really short amount of time that he leaves to go like work on his music, and then the detective comes in, he chats with
Right.
Paula, and then they're like, oh, he's coming back, and it really hasn't been that long. So maybe he's not up there that much, but like, come on, dude! Like all the stuff's up there. You would have found it in like a week, tops. So that part's a little
I mean,
annoying to me,
even
but
if, because that last time, yeah, it's like 30 minutes. Even if he's up there for like 30 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week, you're like, I know there's a lot of stuff, but it's only one room, man, and it's jewels. Like, yeah, I think it is odd. Like, it seems like he could have found it faster, for sure. So, I would say for me, I did not have any specific like. I think they really needed to change this, or they really needed to change that. I think there was a couple of things we talked about that maybe could have made it a little bit better, could have, revealed some things, but did you have kind of something big that you felt like, I really think they should have changed this thing about it?
yeah, for sure. I just, like I said, I just hate movies that like you just know from the get go like what it is. Like, still good. I love the manipulation and stuff and the psychological relationship that they have and everything. Like, that was really good. I like that. But like, my top thing is like, I want a suspense kind of thriller. I don't want to know what it is until the end of it. So I do think like Two Directions that I would have liked a lot better personally, and would have held up, I think, pretty well. Two different things they could have done. One is they could have kept it basically the same, where this guy is the bad guy, but I think they could have dropped some nuggets here and there where there was a second assailant, maybe, potentially there's a second dude, and just a few times kind of drop that nugget, and then you find out like this detective that was working on it, like he was the second guy, and he was working with, and maybe the other guy didn't know. Maybe he's trying to get the jewels for himself. He wants to get them instead of Gregory,
Yeah.
and that's why Gregory's like upset about this dude being around, but he can't say anything about it. So I think that's one thing they could have done to basically keep the movie the same and maybe add a few things. I think the better thing would have been like, just don't make it obvious that he's the bad guy, and have that big reveal at the end, and even keep, there's some really good stuff that they actually could have dropped some hints in. So something I really liked is they first got to the house, and they're checking the house out, and Gregory's like, oh, the drawing room's up here, and then they go upstairs and they're in the room up there, and they carry on, and immediately I'm like, yeah, this dude knows where the drawing room's at because he's been there before, so that makes sense. But then later,
Yeah.
the nosy neighbor is like, oh, she's talking to the detective, and she's like, oh, do you know about the murders? Well, they happened up there in the drawing room, and it's like, that was a good combination of like, oh, is the viewer going to pick up on that? It's very subtle, very light, and it's like, that's something they could have kept in the movie and then kept at the end for that reveal that it's like, yeah, he's Sergis, like this is his letter. He was a suspect. I mean, and a few other things, but just most of the stuff where it was, it's just obvious that it was him. So I would have been blown away with either one of those twists, I think, at the end. But that's not what it was about. It wasn't about having a big reveal. It was about the relationship and manipulation between the two. That's what the movie's really about.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think that makes sense. So I want to, you and I talked before we started recording, and I was like, this movie did make me really think about something else I had watched just recently. And I said, I told you that off air, and I was like, I'm not going to tell you what the movie is, and I just wanted to get like your thought about it. So I just recently listened to the old book, The Invisible Man, and I just recently rewatched the Elizabeth Moss movie from 3 or 4 years ago, The Invisible Man. And this gave me a lot of kind of vibes of that of Gaslight if it was kind of made now. Just in the simple thing of, this guy is manipulating her and he is doing stuff and nobody really believes her for a while. We know for sure that it's happening. People aren't believing her. She really starts to think like I'm going crazy. And then she is able to have that moment of like, no, this is what I said all along. Something is happening. And she kind of gets to have that, moment one on one with him to be like, hey, like, I knew that you were doing this to me and stuff. Did you think of anything like that, or what do you think about that?
I mean, I've not seen that, so I trust that you like that sounds right. That sounds exactly like what this movie is for sure. But like I've not seen that movie or anything, so yeah, I can't really
I
provide
was
more
taking the
reaction than that.
gamble
So
that your reaction might just be, oh yeah, I haven't seen that, so I don't know. Yeah, I was taking a gamble on that a little bit, but so if I think that the kind of connection would be if they were going to remake this movie, I kind of think that like Invisible Man is like a very very now it's not the same thing because in the beginning of Invisible Man, the guy that she is with dies and he already like has been kind of manipulating her. So it's not the same like in person type of reaction, but otherwise it hits a lot of these same beats of she knows that something is going on. And here, this might be an interesting moment to throw in one thing that I didn't mention. So she has this older kind of cook or maid working for her that's mostly deaf, and she has this much younger maid that's working for them also. And there are a few different moments throughout where she kind of tries to like get those two women on her side and be like, do you guys hear something, or like do you think something odd is going on? And pretty much every time she tries to kind of get support from the two of them, they don't take her side really. And I was really curious about that. With the old woman, I was like, well, she is deaf. Like, I think she really just isn't experiencing this stuff. But with the young girl, you're like, you've seen her and Gregory flirting. She is, mentioned as being like promiscuous and stuff. So I'm just like, does she see that Gregory is manipulating Paula the whole time? But she's just fine with it because she kind of, wants to have a piece of him or something too.
yeah, I think it's more like she just likes being noticed, and it's like, oh, it's like cool that like this guy notices me, and also like in the back of her mind, she's like, yeah, right, like come on, why would he do that? That's crazy. No one would do that. That's not happening. So even if she's picking
Yeah,
up on a few things, it's like, nah, like that's not happening. You're being paranoid, and this guy seems like pretty decent. So
yeah, yeah, for sure. It was just kind of an interesting thing that, the other two people in the house with her don't really end up kind of seeing things the way that she's seeing them throughout it. It was definitely pretty interesting.
yeah, yeah.
So I
So
guess before we
what
go into
would
like final stuff, I
oh
just
go
was
ahead,
gonna
man.
ask one more thing. Would you be interested in like a modern remake? Do you think it would work? Is there something you think that would like be cool to do with this movie?
Is it obvious that he's the guy the whole time, or are they a lot
I
more subtle
think
about it in this movie?
Well, I think that's the thing. I think that that would be a big thing that we both agree on. I think that this movie could make like a pretty interesting remake, but we modern audiences pick up on this type of thing like way faster. So you would have to do a lot more. You'd have to be much more subtle about it. You'd have to maybe tone him down a little bit and not show all of, these like super manipulative things. You'd have to pull it back a little bit for sure.
Or I mean, you could go a little bit the opposite, like a Fear direction with Mark Wahlberg, where like you know you do see
Oh
that, but
yeah.
like the cool thing is like well other people just don't, and there's lots of chances and interactions for a little bit. You know later they do obviously, but you know it could be kind of like a reverse thing. So instead of being cooped up at home and experiencing it, like you're trying to get other people to see it, but they're not. So that would work, and movies
Oh
have
yeah,
done that. But I think they'd have
for
to
sure.
be a lot more subtle, you know, with it. But it could work because I mean their relationship and like that aspect's really cool. And we didn't really get to talk about, but I thought that much. But I thought both were like they did a really good job acting, for sure.
Oh
Like
yeah.
Bergman and Boyer, like solid. As I like later, I'm like, boy, this was 80 years ago, and like this is solid.
Yeah.
Like they both did a really good job. You know, I thought they killed it. So they were both really good.
Yeah, I think there was maybe a few times that were like a little over the top, but I feel like overall, yeah, they just I mean, they were just good. Like they were really good in each of the roles that they were playing for sure.
What about you? Do you think they'd be able to do this, make a modern remake?
Yeah, well, I think the kind of I guess the reason I was asking is like I did a little bit of research and it's hard to kind of tell for sure, but definitely within the past like 10 years or so, this term of like gaslighting started popping up a lot. And it doesn't maybe fit all the things of this movie, but we usually, use it to mean like basically someone kind of making you think that your reality is, not what is true, or kind of telling you like no, like it didn't happen, like that, kind of manipulating you in that type of way. So I do think that it could work because this type of these type of things of like sociopaths and narcissism and these type of things are, I'm not going to say like common knowledge like everyone knows, but they are much more kind of in our cultural language of like being able to see this type of manipulative thing. So I probably am not going to like pitch a whole storyline, but I do think it would work. I think that the characters would still be believable, and I think that we would be able to. I think we would have a lot of the same feelings of being like, "Girl, like, how are you not seeing these type of things?" But that's just real. We know real people in situations where we're like, this thing is happening to you kind of right in front of your eyes and you're missing it. So I'd be down for it. If they made a remake of it, I would check it out for sure.
Nice, nice. Well, what score would you give this movie?
I think I would pretty much go with the right around that IMDb, like a 7.5. Like, I don't think, it didn't blow my mind. I've watched a lot of different old movies from the 40s and 30s and 50s, and I thought it was really solid. I was engaged the whole time. I wasn't bored. I don't always like. You definitely picked up on kind of like you kind of picked up on things that ended up being like reveals to me. So I was pretty engaged, and I was kind of like, oh man, like that was crazy. Um, so I think like yeah, I think like seven, mid sevens is good. Uh, as far as really comparing it to like something else this old, it's probably not like one of my favorite really old movies, but I certainly enjoyed watching it. And I would tell someone like, hey, a movie from the 40s is not for everyone. Most of the people kind of our age that I talk to are not just going out of their way to watch 80-year-old movies. But if I was talking to someone that liked watching pretty old movies, I would be like, this is solid. Like I feel like it's underrated because I don't think I've really ever like heard about this movie outside of like being connected with this modern use of the phrase. So yeah, I'm pretty comfortable like a 7. I feel comfortable at for sure.
Gotcha. You know, it's funny you just said like you hadn't heard of it out of the phrase. Like I didn't hear about it till a little bit ago when you brought this movie up, and I looked it up, and I'd never heard of it. I've never
Yeah,
heard of it, so it was interesting. I'd say
right.
like a pretty close
I think that's so interesting.
score, a pretty close score at the time. Like it got a 7.8 on IMDb. I'd at the time, like if I at 44 saw it, yeah, I'd probably give it a 7, maybe even an 8, but a 7 at that time. It was hard for me to kind of come up with a score, so I actually did 2. So taking into context, like it coming out then. So now if it came out like now and I watched it now, I'd probably give it a 4, just because like it's so bad on that he's the bad guy, and I just hate that. Like I don't need that shoved down my
Yeah,
throat,
yeah.
like the way they did it, and just taking into account, like still really good. I know I gave it a 4, but I would definitely still tell people about it. Like you said, if someone did like old movies, definitely watch. I would suggest this because again, the acting is really good, and their relationship dynamic, like I don't know, you don't really get to see that type of psychological thriller, whatever marriage relationship like that just doesn't happen that often in movies. I feel like that you get to see played out like that. So I did like that aspect. But again, just taking into account, like if it came out right now, I went to theaters and I saw it right now, like I'd probably give it a 4.
And then, for the bad movies, I'm gonna try to like bring this up every time because the way I don't always think of movies in terms of like ratings, but I think of it in terms of kind of did I like it and did I think it's good. And some of our other ones, they've hit like it was bad, but I liked it. It was bad and I hated it. And this hits a good. I really enjoyed it, and I think just objectively, it's like done pretty well. The acting is good. I think it just hits that quadrant of it's a good movie, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'd hit that up there too. That same spot. I'd say it's in both. For sure.
Wrapping up, did you have any points of like really interesting trivia, fun fact type of things you wanted to throw out there?
Here's some. A couple that I really liked. I'll save my favorite one at the end. That again, just personally, I just thought was really good. So something we've talked about already, like the term like gaslighting comes from this movie. I don't know when it became popular. I know you were talking about maybe in the last 10 years, but facts I saw it made it seem like it was that started it then. I don't know, but that term kind of comes from that.
Yeah.
This was looked at as like a really big box office success, even though it was a $2 million budget, and it did about 4.5 million, which like doesn't really sound like a lot, but that was a booming success for sure for it to come out, which is cool.
Yeah.
So, something that was interesting. Like this was a really big deal for Ingrid Bergman. So she had only really done like dramas and romantic movies. So this was like stepping out of the box for her, which I think she was like 28 or 29. I mean, she's still pretty young at this time. Like she did do Casablanca.
Okay. Yeah.
But she's super young, so this was like a big deal for her to step out. And I was just reading that people just weren't sure if she was the one, for this part. But again, I thought she was awesome. She did a really good job. This is kind of the start of psychological thrillers, which I didn't like do a deep dive into that, but I believe that for 44, like that's probably about right, for sure for that to come out. Bergman won an Academy Award. They got a lot of nominations, so she did really good. Last two that were like kind of interesting. So Bergman is pretty tall, and so she was the same height as Boyer. So they did a lot of different things to make him be taller than her. So one scene I was reading that was funny, at the train scene at the beginning, they put him on a box so he would be taller than her. And they said that when
Wow.
she kept running out there to kiss him, she kept knocking the box out from under him, and he was falling over. So they like had to do multiple takes of that, which I just thought was funny.
Wow.
And then
Yeah.
Angela Lasbury, I kind of forget how you say her name. She was really tall too, so
Angela
they had to do
Lansbury.
Lansbury. Sorry, I should have known that. I should have known.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
He was
it's
taller, so they had to do even more stuff. Like he had to wear special shoes to make him taller. Like they needed him to be taller than her. So that was kind of funny. And then like the last thing, which I really loved. So Angela was only 17 when they started shooting the movie, and she had a social worker on the set with her.
So she
And
was the one that played Nancy.
oh yeah, that's Nancy. Yeah, dude. Yeah, she was Nancy.
She looked familiar, but I hadn't looked it up, and now I'm just that kind of is blowing my mind. That I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
dude.
that's who that was. I thought she
It's
looked.
yeah, dude. for
I know,
sure.
I
I'm
just
pretty
missed
sure she
it.
wrote.
I just missed seeing her name somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
she was only 17 when it started, so she had a social worker on set with her, and there's a scene where she smokes,
Yeah.
and the social worker didn't let her do that, so they had to wait to do that until she turned 18. So they had a birthday
Oh
party
my
for her
gosh,
on
that's
set
funny.
when she turned 18, and then they filmed that scene right after that, which was near the end of shooting. Like they had to wait and come back, and that's probably like the middle of the movie. I mean, it's not near the end at all, but they had to wait to do that scene because the social worker wouldn't let her smoke because she wasn't 18 yet. So that was really funny. I thought that was really
Yeah, that's wild. I've never heard of something like that happening, really. That's super interesting. Before we all the way wrap up, I want to throw out just a couple other things. So I hadn't looked on IMDb all that carefully just when I was watching this, but when you mentioned the director's name, I actually recognized it, and I think I recognized it from watching. There's a show called Feud, Betty and Joan, and it's kind of about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, and it's set during this time. And so when you said that director's name, I actually recognized him. So just to throw out a few things. Before this movie, he had directed a version of Little Women. He had directed a version of Romeo and Juliet, David Copperfield, and then his big thing was Gone with the Wind. It's the same director.
oh
And
dang,
then
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Gone with the Wind. So that's crazy. And then after Gaslight, he directed A Star Is Born with Judy Garland, which again is huge. And he directed a version of My Fair Lady, which was really big because it had Audrey Hepburn in it. This dude directed like 60 movies. Like the 30s and 40s and 50s were really kind of wild like that. The dudes would be making like 2 or 3 or 4 movies every year sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know for sure, but I think people were also they were working on multiple movies at like one time too, which I don't know if like
Yeah,
or they were just filming
because the
stuff
studio
fast maybe,
system, they
but
would be. Yeah, it would be interesting to know a little more like how long this movie took. Was it kind of standard for a movie like this? Was it shorter or longer? Some of those things are interesting. Just the way they film stuff was just really different than the way they film things now. So I think we're getting pretty close to the end. I would say, we kind of went through the our things. I would recommend this to someone. I'd be like, hey, if you like watching really old movies, I think this is one that's worth checking out for sure.
yeah, I would say that too. I'd recommend it. Again, even just to check out some acting chops from 80 years ago to appreciate and love. And like I said, I think they both did a really good job at it, and it was solid. It was a good movie.
Holds up. So we probably don't know exactly what movie we're going to do next, but I think we'll do probably one more that is kind of considered a classic, and maybe we'll do maybe not quite this old, but maybe a little bit older one again. And hopefully everybody comes back around next time. Hopefully this is an interesting episode for you with what we could describe as like this is a good movie. We're not only going to watch really bad, uncomfortable movies.
Yeah, but we will sometimes. So yeah, but
Good ones
all right, we
sometimes
appreciate
too. Occasionally bad,
appreciate.
sometimes good.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, until next time, I'm Connor.
See you guys
That's
later.
Tanner.